Hello. Here we are showing a collection again. I love doing this. I love actually picking up my fabrics and having a look at them and thinking what it was that inspired these particular fabrics. Now, one of the things that I've been really loving in quilts lately, and what I do is I pore over books of old quilts and seeing how one little scrap of fabric sticks out of a vintage quilt. And there's something that is clear about that. And one of the things that I would like to do is to create simpler and simpler fabrics. So this is one that I've done that is just fan shapes in kind of two colors, really. I mean, it's 4 colors, but it's just to give a nice clear outline that's very fresh to cut up. And I've really been having fun with this particular pattern, and I'll show you different colorways in a minute. Another one is a nice clean backgrounds. So showing, you know, a fabric like this flower with a nice clean sort of background, I find exciting to play with because I like a lot of background when I'm, you know, cutting up a fabric, so that it gives the drama of a pool of color, and then the detail sits on that. And years ago I did a fabric that had a shadow, and it was very effective, I thought. So I've done the same thing again, but this time with a kind of cactus-like, succulent kind of flower. And that comes in many different colorways, and it's really been fun to do colors on. Another one was just working with a very strong geometric, because one of the fabrics that I've loved in the past was called Target. And so this is like quarters of Target, which I've really enjoyed playing with. And this cuts up very nicely for borders or sashing or things like that. And I'm very anxious to see how people play with this as parts of fish or feathers of birds or whatever. The applique artists, I think, are going to have fun with this big, simple, graphic, colorful print. So that's one of them. But my favorite, this collection, is called Charlotte. And that is this flowery fabric, which I'm very, very happy with. And it was inspired by this incredible vase, which I have sitting in my hallway, and I pass it every day on my way up here to work in the studio. And I was loving these little flowers in the background and this kind of soft, mauvey kind of a background behind those little flowers, and then these big primitive flowers on top of that. And so that was the total inspiration. And I also love this jaunty shape of this big Victorian vase, and how these big fat kind of primitive flowers sit on this wonderful shape. It's like sort of maiden aunt with a lorgnette. So I've really had fun with this fabric, and the colorways have come out a real treat, which I will be showing you in a minute. So that's Charlotte. And another fabric that has come out really well is a new Brassica colorway. I love Brassica, you know, and it's one of our staples in our classic range. But what I love about this colorway is these kind of strange magentas and mauves and soft greens. I think this is going to be quite a useful colorway, particularly for people who are playing with a kind of gray-pink kind of palette in a quilt, or as an element of a quilt. And this is a colorway of the Japanese chrysanthemum. Let's see, I've got several pieces here, which I think has worked out particularly interestingly. Oh, sorry about that. So the coloring here is very, very bizarre for me. Kind of strange, off, soft greens, kind of like old marble, and then the black background with, again, these dusty pinks and kind of rhubarb tones. I think that could be, it is actually really fun to play with. I've been cutting this up and making things like hat boxes out of it, and it really works a treat. So, and then there's another colorway on the Japanese chrysanthemum, which is just, again, our kind of pinky range. We are going to move beyond these lovely pinks and pale greens in a minute and look at other colors, but that was just it's such a beautiful graphic of Philip Jacobs. When he brought me the artwork for this, and it was just done in generic colors, and I just thought, I'm going to have such fun. And over the years I've done many different colorways on this because it's one of our classics, and so it's a very beautiful form. Each of these flowers has beautiful shadows and highlights and so forth to play with. And also people have done wonderful quilts. As you will know if you've been sort of watching my progress, that I've become very intrigued with black and white and high contrast, which is quite unusual for me. I'm usually into like old world, old textile, smoldering colors and jewel tones and so forth. But there's something very exciting about black and white. And there is Charlotte in crisp black and white with fresh colors of the cobalt blue and the hot orange, which I think works so well. And this is brilliant as a background for other fabrics. I've been really playing with that a lot. And also my fans, the Royal fans, done in black and white, I think is quite crisp. And then Philip Jacobs coming back to his wonderful detailed feather print, and doing it in very high contrast, very sharp colors, I think is quite exciting. I've also done a beautiful gray version of his shells, these wonderful curly Q shells, which I really love. And this is a new fabric of mine called Regimental Stripes, working with really high contrasting stripes. And then you can see there the what the whole piece of fabric looks like, say as sashing or a border. But I think there's something quite fun about that, particularly when you get into more tonal versions of this, where it's all shades of red or green. And Brandon's new jumble, we've needed a gray jumble in the classic collection of jumbles, which I find one of the most useful fabrics of his I've ever known. I use it all the time. In fact, I've done entire quilts just with shades of jumble. This is dot flower, which I think works very well with the jumble. And there's a quilt that I've designed with that new range of fabrics, with the very high contrast black and white kind of versions.
Your shirt's not bad with it.
Great. Another fabric that I'm really excited to bring back is Philip Jacobs Agate, which is just so detailed and rich. And I've had fun putting that in very odd colors. We started with deep blues and malachite greens and so forth, but to come into these kind of strange off, almost the color of, you know, documents and money and things like that. It has that kind of feeling, or postage stamps. And then here we've got it in grays and lavenders and this wonderful sort of flesh color lifting it. And there's Charlotte in a soft green colorway, which I think really works nicely. And I brought back Philip's big, wonderful Amaryllis print because it's kind of a treatise on stripes. You get beautiful, fine stripes in this particular print, which is fun to play with. Here we've got the regimental stripe in nice chalky pastels, which I think people are going to really have fun playing with that, kind of like circus tents. And we've also brought back the cloisonné, and that was the most popular colorway of cloisonné when that was in our classic range. And so it's fun to bring that back. I think the applique artist cutting each of these flowers out and playing with that is going to be very interesting to see. And there we've got just the original colorway of my rainbow, it's called. Deeper colors, we've got the rainbows in a kind of maroon red colorway, cloisonné in this kind of very earthy moss green, a new jumble of Brandon's with gold and pink spots. And then over here, wonderful, wonderful gray background with these lovely chalky high colors of the dot flower, and that wonderful black center I think works really well. And then reds and pinks in the regimental stripe. And there's the big piece. So, and then, you know, my colorway of the Japanese chrysanthemum in that kind of odd coloring that I like. So here we go into the purple sort of range. Rainbows with a black background just makes it that much deeper and punchier, and the colors really come electric. And I forget what this one is called.
Shadow Flower.
Right, there you go. And then we've got cloisonné with a black background, which I always like, and then with a teal background, and regimental stripes in nice dark palette. I think works very well. And I like this jumble of Brandon's, the dark purple against high orange. I think that's very, very electric and exciting. Yes, there's taking the shells in the center with the agate as a border and the stripes and these wonderful. So it's a very active kind of quilt, but I think people could have fun playing with that. So here we are with the sort of deep red story, sort of burnt reds and oranges and pinks and purples thrown in. So we get a nice dark feeling. I love dark quilts, and I love people that take all these very, very dark fabrics and play with them. I've noticed this is a jumble that people are already playing with and making very interesting demonstrations of how that can work. The black on that kind of beaten copper background. But I think the shells of Philips work very well in these very, very high contrast story. There's the red Charlotte, and of course the magenta cloisonne coming back to show its head, and Brandon's dot flower down here in these high pink with that wonderful green that just sings out of that pink background. So people should have fun with that. I like to do whole quilts of nothing but spots and dots and circular prints. Yes, I've done a tumbling block quilt. And so that's kind of interesting to see with a very, very dark and contrasting story. And in a second, I'm going to show you blue colorways that led to. So here we are in the wonderful cobalt blue world. Starting with my fans here in kind of very, very rich blues on a pale soft green background. Brandon's dot flower in all shades of blues and greens. Charlotte done, I just love the way it's kind of electric feeling of the light background and the darker flowers in the background. And then these kind of dark flowers emerging with their sort of halo of light around each one. I think that works really well. And the regimental stripe I love in these kind of cold tones. And there we've got a picture of the whole piece of fabric. That flower, I think, with the black background works very, very well in those shades of dark blue. And the fans just nice and bright and succulent-like in that lovely soft green against the darker green background. Two new jumbles of Brandon's. These are going to be really fun to play with as time goes by. So, yes, and there's the tumbling blocks again. At this time you can see where some of these blue fabrics, which get a little bit lost in here in a small detail, but you can imagine when that quilt is full size that you would see those details. So that's the new collection. One of the things I will show you, I just like to show a bigger piece of the shells, which this colorway I really, really am very, very happy with. That kind of strange off-color. I can see this being used with very traditional fabrics in very sort of soft colorways, very naturalistic colorways, and working really well. So, and also with wonderful shades of gray, you know, sort of pearly grays and silver grays and so forth. Could be really fun, and a lot of the modern quilters are into those lovely velvety gray areas in their quilts. This one too would work incredibly well with, you know, the agate. That soft mossy green and the kind of pale blue, sky blue, I think it just really works nicely. It's kind of like old Technicolor films, as I remember as a child, where all the color was slightly softened, slightly muddied. And this colorway really gets me. I just find it, particularly in a big piece, is very, very exciting. we were watching a film called Fantastic Fungi, and a lot of the funguses looked like the sort of motifs that you see in this particular wonderful fabric of Philip Jacobs.
Can you talk about doing the colours for Philip's fabrics?
Yeah, when Philip brings me his artwork, it's always very detailed, but just in generic colors that he uses over and over and over again. Sometimes he breaks out and does something a bit more colorful, but what I always see is the potential for me to put my coloring into his beautiful artwork, his beautiful forms. And so it's very exciting adding my color touch. And then the whole collections go together so well. Like you can see how these shells are looking particularly good with these colors, you know. Already we're starting to get a story there that could just hold together very, very nicely and be quite elegant. Now here's a bit more drama in that particular story. You know, stepping up into the purples and magentas and kind of very pale silvery pinks, and then touch of hot orange, just making the whole thing jump. And of course, the black is incredibly important. Philip paints these out, and they take a long time because they're incredibly detailed. And I really appreciate that as a vehicle for color.
How many hours would you say you spend on each artwork, recoloring Philip's fabric? Each one takes about a week?
I sometimes it goes quite quickly, and most of the time it's quite laborious because they're so detailed, as you can imagine. I paint out by hand each of the colorways, which we just make a printout of the fabric, and then I paint over each color with my new color scheme. So it can go on for a long time, and day after day, but it's nothing compared, I'm sure, to the work that Philip puts in on the actual artwork. So I really appreciate that. So I hope that you're enjoying these.